My workbench is a disaster, as in a dumpster fire of a mess of all the apparatuses, jigs, clamps, holdfasts, hammers, all the junk I actually need on my bench. And what's sad is it'd be really nice to be able to store even more stuff without knowing it's probably going to get destroyed down here. Plus the fact that I'm old and fitness challenged, so getting down here to find anything is a real pain. I need a solution where I can actually store a little bit more. It won't get filled up with shavings and crap and stuff like that. It might protect stuff out a little bit, but still be conducive to how I use a workbench, which is a big clamp with holdfasts, banging stuff, and all that kind of work. Hence, I need a workbench hammock, something that won't hold sawdust, won't impede my holdfast, and will hold lightweight tools. Now to make this shelf, I bought 2 oak dowels. I found a smaller poplar dowel in my collection, and I ordered some macrame cord off of Amazon, and I'll put a link in my description of what I actually bought. You can get this kind of cord in 2 different styles, the twisted kind. This is actually the braided kind. This just seems more appropriate for what we're doing here. Now the dowels, I was not really concerned about getting them dead flat. I don't think either one of these were, but I was concerned about getting the grain running all the way down. So when you're picking them out, concern yourself with following the grain. You do not, most of them are going to come where the grain is going to run off. That's probably going to break over time, even something this thick. So just take your time, go through them. Normally you're focusing on getting them dead straight, but in this application, that isn't really that big a deal. Just get the grain straight. Now in hindsight, you don't need to go get yourself a dowel. I don't know why that was my thinking. If you're a woodworker, you can just make yourself a square. This is a 1-inch dowel, so a 1-inch square would be perfectly fine. Use any scrap you have, any hardwood, I would say. I don't know why I did this. It seems most of the videos I've seen on making real hammocks were like, 300-pound guys and all their kids that play around on, they all seem to use curtain rods, so I just figured a 1-inch dowel would be good enough. I should have saved the money. Now every shelf is going to be different because you're putting in different size benches, of course. My particular bench, the space underneath between the legs is 22.5 inches across and basically 49.5 inches wide. Now this is a suspended design, so you don't have to attach too many complicated things to your workbench, and you can remove it, you can move it, you can relocate it, you can do whatever you want with this setup. To accomplish that one, we want to make our dowels a little bit shorter than this 22.5, maybe an inch on each side, so I'm just going to make it 20 inches to make the math easy for myself. And you're going to want it quite a bit shorter on the lengthwise. So I'm going to do 6 inches from each side, so over a foot off of that, just to make it so that as it sags over time, you can kind of stretch it back out to make it more solid. Now, if you were stupid and you bought dowels instead of just using a piece of wood, you now need to draw a straight line all the way down on the top of it. And the easiest way I know to do that one is to not worry about whether you found the top or not. Just hold the rod still, grab a pencil, and just draw a line anywhere without moving the rod itself. Then you've got a nice straight line that all you have to do is get it to the top dead center where a drill bit or something like that, and you've got it dead in the middle. Now we now got to drill holes to put the cord in to, tie up our hammock. Everyone's going to be different. So here's a general pattern. You're going to have groups of 2 holes, okay? So here's my first group. And then I want to have this amount of space in between them before my second group. So if you're doing a hole on every single inch, I would do 1, 2, I would script 2 inches, and then I'd go 3, 4, I would skip 2 inches, and I would do 5, 6, okay? The key thing is though, when you end up total of these groups, you want an odd number of groups. You'll have an even number of holes, that's just how math works, but you want an odd number of groups. And then how you space it out is you take your first group, that's going to be in the dead center or either side of the dead center of whatever your rod would be. So on my rod, if I'm doing them on the inch, I would go to 10 inches, and then I would do like a 1/2 inch on one side, a 1/2 inch on the other. Now for those of y'all that are curious, with my 20 inches, I came out to the 5, and I am doing them on 1 inch is going across, except my gap, in order to give me an odd number, instead of doing a 2-inch gap, I'm doing an 1.5 inch gap between them. And on the last two, I'm just doing them a 1/2 inch in between. That'll make sense because the last two, we are not doing the hammock. We're actually going to braid those. So with all that information, it's time to grab your dowel and start making cross lines wherever you need to drill a hole on that line you drew earlier. And in case you can't tell, nothing about this project needs to be perfect. Skip over 1.5 and I ended up all right. Next, we're going to be drilling holes. So you're going to want to pick the right size bit. The hole you're going to be drilling, you're going to have to get 2 cords in each hole. So choose wisely. I would think a little bit looser, a little bit too big a hole would be better than too small a hole. Me personally, I'm going to go 1 size bigger than 1/4, whatever that is. And if at all possible, use a brad point bit, the kind that has that little tip in the middle. It'll make your life a lot easier if you're drilling into dowels. Plus the outside spurs, it'll give you a cleaner hole, so it won't be as ragged on the cord going through. Now you could freehand drill these or use your drill press, whatever you want to do. Me personally, I'm going to use this little gizmo right here simply because it already has a center finder on it. So if I just line this up here and I use the brad point bit to find those crosshairs, well, there's no way I can't get it in the dead center. It just makes life a little bit easier, but man, this is so simple enough that you could just freehand it if you don't have something like this. Now with all the holes done, this is going to be the last chance to do any kind of make pretty you want on these dowels. Otherwise, anything you do is going to get on the cords. So if you want to, chamfer the holes, sand it off, that kind of stuff. Me personally, I'm going to be sanding it down to get rid of the pencil marks. Probably chamfering the holes so it'll slide in and out easier. Probably less fraying on the rope, and maybe dressing up the ends. Now we move on to the cord, and this is where that thinner dowel rod is going to come into play because it takes a lot to unwind this by hand. So if you just use a dowel rod, you can spin it. Now I'm going to guesstimate how much of this I want because I did not find any, kind of calculator on how much cord to use, especially since everything else was for full-size hammocks and all we are doing is making a shelf. So I'm going to guesstimate that I want 3 times the length of my shelf in cord as we're going to be doing knots and angles all the way down. Actually, I'm going a little bit over 3 times. I want a 3-foot shelf, so I've got a little over 10 feet of cord right here, 10 feet this way, so this one strand is now 20 feet. I did that because we were putting 2 cords per hole. Well, this will just be an easier way to pull both through the hole and I can cut it after the fact. Now, because I don't want to have to refine center nor untangle a pile of spaghetti to find the individual cables, I'm going to go ahead and start running them through the dowel rod just for organizational purposes. And to do that one, I went and cut out, a wire from some Romax, just feed it through, do a loop, and I now have a tool to make it easy to get through the dowel rod. And I'm just going to start in the middle, but that doesn't really matter. So I come in, pull it through. First one's going to be hard as you smash that Romex down, and there we go. Center the rope, feed it in our little tool, find the hole, drag it through. And now by simply cutting those two loops, we get our four strings ready to do our first knot. Now we are only going to be doing 2 knots. Well, technically 1 knot and 1 braid in this entire project, for the simple reason I don't want you to get too into doing this knot stuff, because it's kind of the gateway drug into knitting, and we all know that knitting is evil, done by evil people, and I don't want you to go down that dark path. So you're only going to learn 1 knot here. Though, if you are a knitter and you know a better knot, hey, feel free to tell me something down below. Or better yet, maybe link it to an Instagram video of tying the knot so everybody could learn. Here, we're going to do a square knot. So to make the square knot we're going to be using, I'm actually going to start out with a variation to anchor it on top, and then we'll make it simpler as we go down. And the whole idea is that we basically have our 2 strands. We're now going to make an interior grouping and an exterior grouping. The exterior grouping is going to do all the work. So basically we're going to braid it. We're going to go over the top 2 with the outside and then underneath that one. Then we're going to go underneath the inner 2 and then over the top one, and this time we're going to bring it through. And that makes the first part of the knot. Now we're going to, this is the variation. We're going to make these 2 the interior. So now I have those 2 interiors right there, and we're going to repeat the same exact process. Under, over, over, and then technically under by going through. And then just tighten it all up. Now, one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a tad bit of CA glue on these exterior knots only, but I need to warn you, cotton and CA glue can have an exothermic reaction, so just do this sparingly, and I would watch it for that first 30 seconds while it dries, blowing on it so it doesn't heat up, because I have actually seen in my wood turning world where I use cotton paper towels that they actually started smoking and cindering. The reaction was so hot. But that right there should lock it all together so it never comes apart. So quick review of the knot. We have interiors, we have exteriors. We take one exterior, we go over over and under. We take this one, go under and over. And then you can kind of cinch it up. Now we will reverse. These become the exterior, these become the interior. Once again, over. Well, actually this time, because it's already going over, I'm going to go under, then over, over, then under. Always doing the opposite of the last step. Then we can tighten those up. Put a little bit of CA as a low insurance. Check it out. Can you see that little bit of smoke? That's why you got to watch it. Then it's just a matter of rinse and repeat until you get all the holes filled. Now making those sections 10 feet, I pretty much used up one entire roll of that stuff I got. But I do have a second one just in case. I think I got more than I need. Now to do the rest of this, I highly suggest you hang this. I've gone ahead and put two C-clamps up there. I'm just going to use some string to hang it up about that height level so that I can braid down 3 feet. Now that it's hanging, I'm going to put the same alternative square knot up against here, thus locking the bar in between 2 knots. Just work your way across. Outer inners. Over, under, under, over. Pull it all the way through. Next, we're going to focus on the 2 outside packets of 4 strands. We're going to braid them all the way down, but be sure to stop at however long you want your shelf to be. Me wanting it 3 feet, I got myself a yardstick, so I'm going to stop braiding and put another one of those locking square nuts at the end of that braid. Then just make sure when you braid the other side, that's the exact same length. This is one of the only areas that you kind of want to be fairly accurate, at least within 1/4 inch. Now the braiding couldn't be simpler. You just take your outside one, go over, under, and over, then start again with the outside one. Over, under, over. You're going to want to keep it pretty tight. And about every 4th or 5th one, go ahead and undo the strings that are hanging underneath it so that they don't get too braided up. I will say if you ever need to take a break, using a spring clamp to hold it makes life a lot easier. Okay, I've now got my 3-foot section and I'm about to put that locking square knot to kind of seal this up. But I will say right now, it looks like I way overestimated how much rope I needed. Maybe twice the length of your shelf requirements is all you need. 2.5 to be safe. But we'll find out more for sure once we get all the center section done up. Now I'm not sure if my timing is right, but I'm going to go ahead and put the braided pieces through the rod right when I finish braiding them, just because I think it will help me to size the center whenever I start doing those knots to get them to the correct size. Okay, now it's going to come the really repetitious part. Braiding all this kind of stuff. And to get my spacing right, I did make another tool. Just a sliver of a piece of scrap, probably the thinner the better. I did smooth it really smooth so that I can drag it across this without catching splinters. I kind of tapered it on the end, and you can see that it's about the width of that right there. If you don't have a piece of scrap or the ability to make something like this, a piece of cardboard would do just fine. Mine is about 1 3/4 inches this way. Just remember, the wider you make it, the bigger the spacing will be. The shorter you make it, the more work you're going to have to do. There's always compromises. Okay, so in this setup, we are going to be doing square knots again. So square knots, you had those two cords that came down. This time, we're basically going to be treating these as one. On the outside, go ahead and set it aside, and then come over and stretch over one, grab 2 here, and we are going to make a square knot out of these 2. We have our centers, okay? And this side, we're going to go over, under, over, and then just drag that one through, okay? That is one portion of a square knot. But this time we're going to stay with these outside ones. And the reason why I chose this knot over other ones is because if you'll notice this center section right here, it is going to be movable on the inside. So that'll give this a little bit of flex. We're not actually locking the center too. So right now I'm going to do the same thing over here. Come over, grab 2 on this side, 2 on that side, and then do the beginning of the square knot. I have my center. I'm going over, under, over, and then pull it through. Another nice thing is you only have to pull one item. So you're going to want to do that to all of them. Grab 2 from the opposite sides and do the first part of the square knot. Last one. Over, under, over, and through. So we now have them all the way across. Now you want to grab your spacer and you're going to pull up the center two. Pull out the center twos, the ones that slide. And then snug them so that they're all tight with the top. Now, as you work your way down, if this starts to get lopsided, this is the time you can reset it. Because if you want to, you can kind of lower it on one side, and that'll kind of keep your knots going the same alignment. From here, just do those square knots again. Only this time you can go ahead and fully tighten it up. When you've got them all done, just pull out your spacer. That's why you want to sand these sides pretty easily. Now we're going to repeat the same exact process, except this time we're going to take those two outside ones and we're going to wrap it around the cord about right there. And then you can take two and start the entire process over. Over, under, over, pull through. First section is done, leave it loose, run your spacer through, tighten it up, and continue on down. And after that last knot, it's just a matter of using the little wire jig to feed the cable through the holes so that you can put the final knots on the other side of the rod. Now, as I'm doing this, I am thinking that I kind of like the idea that I made this piece right here the same size as this, because I think I'm going to actually cut two holes on it, and then I can just feed that through and they'll separate out the middle section. Because right now, without that, it's tending to kind of come towards the middle, even after I put pressure on right here. So it's thinner in the middle. It'd be nice to kind of spread it out. And since it's not somebody just sitting their fat butt in the middle, it's more us putting tools along it. I think the extra width would be kind of nice. Now, if as a woodworker, you are now thinking that your knitting skills are that of a third grader's, don't worry about it. It's going underneath your workbench. You're not really going to have to look at it that much. And trust me, your tools won't care. But speaking about getting underneath the workbench, let's go ahead and mount it up. And to do that one, you're going to need that dowel we had earlier. Now, I can think of a lot of different ways you could create anchor points for the suspension of this shelf. You could just use eye hooks, screw them into whatever legs you have. It'd be really cool if I made something fancy and just made a little wood panel on a corner that kind of wrapped around with a grain going sideways like this, so you can kind of screw in this way and create a loop right there. But I am going to take the simple solution and just use the dowels. Just drill in 2 holes a little bit higher than where I want the shelf to be, because it's going to sag a little bit, and then put the dowel in there as an anchor point for the suspension. Now, when I drill these holes for the dowels, I'm going to be sure that I don't go perpendicular into the board. I'm actually going to tilt it back a little bit. That way, whenever the suspension, the ropes I'm using, get hooked on it, they're not going to want to slide off. And you don't have to have it that far back. I'm just doing a little bit. So I'm coming down 4 inches myself, angling it back just a tad bit, and making a big enough hole for the dowel. Now, I'm not going to glue these in because the angle is going to keep them locked in, and who knows, I might want to move it later on. Now, I am right-handed, so most of the time when I'm reaching for a tool or I'm putting one up, for example, my broom right here, I'm probably just going to be working it here, and I just want to go like that. So if you remember, I purposely created this bench to be basically 6 inches from each leg. Well, I'm actually going to locate this side almost as close to the leg as possible, and then over time I can stretch it out going this way to tighten it up. That gives me 12 inches of adjustment in the future. So real quickly, I'm going to take some of that leftover string that I cut off the ends, and we're going to anchor it to this side, my right-hand side. So to start out, I'm taking those 2 strings. I'm not sure how long I'll need, but right there. I'm going to double it over like that, and then I'm going to create a little loop. Just bring that around, tie it off. And this allows me so that I can wrap stuff around, and whenever I come back, I can put this side through and really cinch it down between the 2 points to get some pressure on this particular string. That's all this little loop is to give you a tie down point that you can pull upon. So after that, it couldn't be simpler. I can just take this, bring the loop, leave that close to the peg so that you can pull down on it, and on my hammock, I'm just going to come in between the first and second loop and just start wrapping it around, trying to get it as tight as possible. And what I'm going to want is eventually it's going to hang about right there. So you can just kind of eyeball where you want it to be, use that loop as a tie-off point, and then just tie it down. Now we're going to do the same exact thing to the other side, but obviously it's not going to stretch all the way to the legs because, you know, we left that gap. But this is the side we're going to use as to tension it. So you need to get more than 2 wraps around it, so you're going to need a longer string to do that one. So once again, just hold it up there, bring it in between the first and second rung. Those knots will kind of hold it, and then just tighten it up. Now, right now, this is pretty tight. I mean, it's going to hold my brushes and stuff like that, but I know it's going to loosen up over time. That is why I wanted this angle right here whenever I tightened it up, because I can use the same technique I used to tighten up my bow saw. I can take a dowel, I can put it in the middle of those 2 and just twist them, and it will tighten up the more you twist it. And because it is now angled, I can just kind of extend it out and it will catch underneath to hold the tension. And over time, just tighten it up even more and more and more. So now I have a shelf that will not impede my holdfasts. Will be able to hold a lot of my lightweight tools that would probably get damaged down below while I'm using it. Plus the fact it's not going to hold any more sawdust. It'll just fall right through. There you go. A quick, fun little project. Won't take you too much long to do, require much skill, much tools, but can add some real functionality to any kind of workbench or table. Granted, this was just something I had in my head. I looked at a few videos, I watched a few blog articles, and then I went at it. So there's probably a lot of different design aspects that you might think we could improve. If so, just leave a comment down below. A constructive comment. But in the end, I want you to remember that it is always worth the effort to learn new things, even if it is a gateway into knitting, create stuff, and share it with others. Y'all be safe and have fun. Oh, do me a favor, like, favorite, and subscribe.